gonna get my thing.
Just gotta hit play.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, my name's Jen. I'm going to talk to you today about whiskey, and specifically from Scotland, Scotch Whisky, which is always spelled without the E. You will never see an E when it's Scotch Whisky. When I think about Scotland, there's a whole bunch of things I think about. I think about plaid and the plains and bagpipes. I like bagpipes a lot. I think about the Highlander, that's not up there. I think about golf. I think about the whole debacle with Mary Queen of Scots and all of the drama with England. But really, I like thinking about whiskey, and really nice whiskey. I really have an appreciation for it. It started with wine, and then I started to get into all different liquors and things and actually understanding them. And Scotch is really similar to wine in that it can be really expensive, and probably the most expensive bottle that I was able to find was a $54,000 bottle that was made in 1926. It was actually bottled in 1986. It was purchased in 2007. That's $800 a shot, folks, on some Scotch here from Macallan's. Some people love whiskey so much that they drink themselves to death. Dylan Thomas, great writer, and it's gone down in history that he actually died from drinking 18 shots of whiskey straight. Really, he had pneumonia and his doctor misdiagnosed him. So, bummer for him. But what is Scotch exactly? There's some really specific stuff. There's actually an act, or an order that was passed in 1990 that covers things like natural processes, what percentage of alcohol by volume it has to have coming out of the cask so that it retains its flavors. It can't be more than 94.8%. You end up with 4 different options here. If it's a single malt or a single grain, it's coming out of one distillery. If it's blended, it comes from multiple distilleries. Malt is always barley, and the grains can include corn or rye or different types as well as the barley. So the malting process, you take your barley, and they think it was discovered by accident. It's actually germinated. And then dried. Then, when they're drying it, they add peat to the smoke. That's where that flavor in Scotch comes from. After that, they grind it, and they mix it with hot water. So alcohol is actually produced when yeasts digest sugar. So the enzymes that happen during the germination process are what actually convert this starch into sugar, and that happens in this tank that you see here, where it's mixed with hot water and it sits. Once you end up with your wort, is what it's called, they put it into these tanks and they start the distillation process, where it's brought to a boiling point and it evaporates and condenses, and they do this twice, at least twice, sometimes 3 times. Irish whiskey is always 3 times, so it's a little bit purer. And then it goes into a cask for at least 3 years and 1 day. Sometimes it'll sit in casks for 50 or 60 years. What happens with the casks then, on a single malt whiskey, when you purchase something like that, it's coming from a single distillery. Something that's blended, these guys are buying casks from multiple producers and mixing things together. So if it's the blended single malt, if it's a, sorry, lost track. Here's some of my favorite Scotch whiskeys. These are all done in the little pot stills like you saw in that photo. And these started as sometimes hundreds of years ago in somebody's basement or in their kitchen or in their barn. These are all families who started distilling whiskey. The first documented production of whiskey in Scotland was at this abbey. It was for the king, and it was 1,500 bottles in 1494. So that's what we have on record. Obviously it was going on before then with all of these families, but this was the first major production. So anymore we have 5 major regions where whiskeys are designated as being produced, and there's different characteristics associated with each of them. A lot of it has to do with, for example, the peat that they're using. It imparts different flavors. Some of it has to do with the families. So when whiskey production started in Scotland, like I said, it was in people's basements, it was in their kitchens, and for a long, long time casks were traded, they were given as wedding presents, and it very much was a family thing. In I think it was 1644, the government started taxing whiskey. And this really upset a lot of people, and so it only served to really create this underground, where I think there was something like 8 registered distilleries actually paying tax, but there were thousands of them all across the countryside. That's what we have the remains of today. There's about 100 distilleries active in Scotland right now. About 27 that they have records of. Most of them are called silent. It means that the buildings are still there. The production facilities are still there. They're just not producing. So once it comes out of that cask, it goes into a bottle. And usually from a single producer, it'll say 18-year Scotch. So what that means is that they're actually blending from their own distillery, different casks. So that's the youngest Scotch that's in the bottle. You might have 18-year Scotch in there, and that might be your primary bit, but then there's 50-year Scotch that you're drinking also. I recommend it room temperature, rocks on the side. Add one at a time. The water will change the flavor. So if something seems really harsh, really peaty, it's overwhelming to you, you can change that by adding a little bit of water at a time, a little bit of ice, and just enjoy those flavors. I found this picture of Grover drinking whiskey, which I thought was amazing. He's my favorite Muppet. But check it out at the Irish Lion. You should go down. They have 30 different whiskeys that you can try, Scotch whiskies. So, thank you.